Sunday, July 25, 2010, at about 5:58 p.m., a 40-foot pipe segment near Marshall, Michigan ruptured. The Enbridge Energy pipeline caused 1.1 million gallons of heavy crude oil originating from Alberta and Saskatchewan, Canada, to spill into the Kalamazoo River. Original cleanup was estimated at $5 million. The total cleanup cost exceeded $1.2 billion.
Hello, I'm Fred Vitale, and I'm the chairperson of the Green Party of Michigan. With me today are Chris Wahmhoff, Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate, and Sherry A. Wells, Green Party candidate for the State Board of Education. Chris is a freedom fighter from Kalamazoo who is facing prison terms for protesting the reckless endangerment of life that occurred after the spill from the Enbridge pipeline into the Kalamazoo River. We were honored to run him as our candidate. We must also mention another Green, the Reverend Edward Pinkney, who ran for Congress against Fred Upton in the 6th District. He is a freedom fighter from Benton Harbor who has been sentenced to prison on trumped-up felony charges. We urge you to support both of them and keep them in your thoughts. For us Greens, the first conclusion to draw from the recent elections of the Republicans in the state of Michigan as well as nationally is that the country is not moving in a direction that supports those policies. Rather, for us, the country is really becoming polarized, with the small group of wealthy pushing more and more policies to increase profits through war, through environmental destruction, through attacks on working people here at home. While the overwhelming majority of people in the state of Michigan have seen our standard of living falling and our living conditions worsen. At the same time, young black people in particular are mobilizing regularly against police murders. We've achieved civil rights victories for gay people, and we had the biggest demonstrations against human-caused climate change took place this year in New York. Both major parties have failed to provide a clear vision of a better life for all, and that is one of the reasons for the polarization in this country. We have a vision, Greens do, of a better life for all, which grows out of these incipient movements that are taking place today. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. But first, let's ask Sherry Wells, who ran for the State Board of Education. What are the key issues in 2015 that you see today?
The governor is planning on what is called a portfolio district. And what that is further decentralizing, which means taking our schools away from us. Grassroots democracy is a Green Party pillar in Michigan, in the United States, in every country across the world that has a Green Party. And grassroots democracy is not working for us anymore. We need to take it back. We need to take our schools back. They're going to be doing more charter schools. Michigan has the biggest number of charter schools, for-profit charter schools, in the country. That is not one of the number ones I want us to be. They talk about choice, but we know that people, especially poorer people, do not have the choice to choose what school. They don't have the transportation, they don't have the time, they don't have the funding. Those schools have boards of education appointed by the corporation that owns the schools. That is not grassroots democracy. They're trying to pull teachers out of the system. Teachers are, in a survey of adults, who was most influential to you? 1/3 of them were teachers. They're wanting to put students and computers together. 1/3 of the adults will soon say, oh, a computer was the most influential person in my life, certainly. They're calling these schools deficit schools, financially disabled schools, but they're taking money away. They'll pour money into roads and they'll take it away from schools, and all of a sudden the schools are failing. Imagine that.
So Chris, what do you see are the issues in 2015?
I definitely think seeing the recent decisions with the roads and how the people of Michigan respond with that is going to be important. What I feel is the most glaring issue for Michigan, and quite honestly for the country right now, is a line called Line 5. It's a pipeline that's 60 years old. Just the last week as we taped this, there was a pinhole piercing in this line that spilled thousands of gallons of oil in something the size of a pen in a matter of minutes. The 60-year-old line runs on 20 to 30% of the entire world's fresh water supply, and by the admission of the company, if this pipeline ruptures, it'll take 8 minutes for it to spill 1.5 million gallons of product, as they call oil, into the Great Lakes. That will destroy Michigan's economy. And I think when we talk about these ideas of national security and all these things, I can't think of anything more dangerous than the U.S. losing the world's largest group of fresh water.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that's come across as the governor's signature accomplishment, which was the bankruptcy in Detroit. For those of us who live in the city, in fact, as Stephen Henderson from the Free Press admitted, the activist and community in Detroit has opposed all aspects of emergency management that have taken place in the city. The claim that Detroit owes all this money to the banks is a result of corrupt and poor management locally is a lie. The main reason that Detroit had financial problems was decades of institutional racism and decades of financial austerity policies from the government, from both on the national level and the state level, as well as in Detroit itself. Those are the two reasons. And so when you talk about racism, structural racism, you're talking about redlining, you're talking about predatory lending from the banks. In this last crisis, when the bottom fell out, black people lost 90% of the equity, of the wealth that they had created in the previous period. So right now, for example, the average black family has $5,000 worth of wealth, and the average white family $113,000. This structural racism is the reason behind the problems of Detroit, and not poor local leadership. And I think the reason for the bankruptcy really was to open up a full-scale attack on public sector workers and pensions. Kevin Orr, the emergency manager in Detroit, said that 90% of the savings came from the reductions in health care and pensions for city workers. That's where the savings came. Nothing about the banks, nothing about the predatory loans that the banks had given to the city, nothing about the problems of revenue sharing, which the state cut off after it had agreed to give it to Detroit. All those things are not the problem. We are told the problem was poor local leadership, and what we've seen happen is, in fact, balancing the budget on the backs of city workers and pensions. I wanted to ask you, Sherry, I know that there have been a number of attempts by the state legislature to further restrict the rights of women in Michigan, and I wanted to know if there was any thing that you wanted to let our listeners know about that.
Specifically, 4 of us women in Ferndale are going to meet. We are going to rack our brains for women we could encourage to run, to apply for boards and commissions, which is a very first level to start getting involved in the political scene. And we need far more women. We need our 51%. And what's interesting in women's movements all along, especially in the United States history of women's movements, is they have been also seeing progress for minorities. The abolitionists, the women put the abolition movement even ahead of their own. And women have done that, and we will continue to do that. So we can be the solution. But if each community gets 3 or 4 women together to encourage other women to run, to give our mayors and our school board presidents the binder of qualified women to appoint. Every board, every city has commissions and committees. The school board has committees. They can't get all of their work done without these committees and commissions and boards. Mm-hmm. Those are volunteer positions. Volunteer for them. I counted 40 men and 13 women on our boards and commissions. Told the mayor in public at a city council meeting, and when he appoints a woman, he looks over at me and says, "Sherry, I've appointed another one." I said, "I saw, but we're going to give him a binder," and all of the women out there can do that too. We run the families, but we're being fought back even on the efforts we're doing for that. So we shall overcome.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Chris, I know that as the entire spill was really an attack on an entire community, not just an individual or a series of individuals. So what are your visions? What do you say are some Green Party visions for community in 2015?
Definitely, I think when we look at the oil spill, you don't only see the environmental impact, which was nothing short of devastating and changing for that entire area. You also look at the systemic way that it links up with what we're seeing in Michigan, and it's a corruption problem. In this country in 1980, the 1% owned 8% of all of our GDP. Today, it's more than 25%, and it's still on a growing incline. Legally speaking, you see the incurrence and what was brought towards Enbridge. They were fined $4.3 million for a company that makes $40 million a day. They are in violation right now, and they haven't been brought to any justice for that. There's no accountability on that. But it's the same with the banks. It's the same with Whirlpool that's locked up our friend Everett Pickney. It's the same across the nation that there's a representation of large money that controls our government. And when you look at that, when you look at these schools like Princeton that are clearly saying there is no longer a democratic America, this is an oligarchy America. And when you see that, you see all these branches of corruption growing out. And as Henry David Thoreau once said, you need to go at the root. We need to start talking about getting money out of Michigan. And I think that you're not going to do that with a large campaign of TV ads and things like that, because you're never going to outspend these corporations. What's powerful with the Green Party and what's important and very great about what you said is we need to encourage people to get up and run. We have to start at the local level. We have to get into these committees. We have to get into our city councils. We have to get into our school boards. And we have to start setting a precedence as a people of Michigan that we're not going to take money from these large corporation-backed people. We look at this election, $40 million for our Governor Snyder. The election I was in, the Senate race. A large majority of that money had nothing to do with companies that had a part of Michigan. On both sides, it was large corporations that have a vested interest in having those people as seats. We need to boycott any of the people that are willing to take money from these large corporations that are showing no accountability to the people. And when we do that, we're going to start seeing more funding for these schools come back and more to these places. Whatever your passion is, there's going to be a fight. There is going to be a fight. But how we win this war against, and it is, I feel like, a war that's on the common people through corporations. is that we take this small accountability, these small steps here, and reclaim a city at a time through our local government, and get in the streets. Howard Zinn once said that it's important for us to not only make change inside the building, but to make change by being out in the streets. And you look at Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, you look at so many movements, Gandhi and others, all of these, there was a 1-2 punch of, yes, okay, we're going to try the system, and we're going to change these laws, we're going to push there. But if it's too corrupt, we're going to be on the streets, we're going to demand accountability, and we're going to use community and build together. When you put those two things together, I think that's when you start seeing the largest change, when I look back and look at historical America, as we call it. And that's my hope, and that's my vision for the Green. We have ballot access. All the people across Michigan, we see these problems, whether it's the roads, whether it's the environmental impact, whether it's the segregation, whether it's the class warfare that we're seeing. All of it starts with us relying on each other, people getting together on the local level. And that's what I loved about the Green Party, is this embrace of grassroots, because that's the only way I've ever seen real change happen.
And in 2016, Michiganders will have the opportunity to vote on a number of important ballot initiatives. The first will be a ballot initiative to ban hydraulic fracking in Michigan. Sponsored by the Ban Fracking in Michigan organization, this initiative will stop the process of extracting gas from the ground through very severe processes called hydraulic fracking. The second ballot initiative is around the legalization of marijuana, sponsored by the Normal organization. And we have a short video to show you about that.
We have a sign-up sheet. There will be a ballot initiative in 2016 to legalize marijuana in the state of Michigan. Hello everybody, happy hash bash! My name is Matt Abel, I'm the director of Michigan Normal. If you're not a member of Michigan Normal, you should be. We are going to legalize marijuana. It is clear that the train is rolling and there is no stopping it. The light at the end of the tunnel is green, ladies and gentlemen. The light at the end of the tunnel is green, and we gotta go. And the thing is, this thing is not going to legalize itself. We are almost at the tipping point, but we need to push it over the tipping point. So what's that? That's the smell of freedom!
I think the Green Party, too, offers, you mentioned the 4 pillars, just so we can let people know what they are. They're ecological wisdom, grassroots democracy, nonviolence, and social justice. And these pillars really are a different vision of a world than that put forward by the Democrats and Republicans. Because for us, these are the goals that we want to achieve. We want social justice, where there is food and clothing and shelter for everyone.
And water.
And water, that's right. We want grassroots democracy, which means we're democracy where we actually control what happens from the bottom. So much has been lost of grassroots democracy in this country. Where do people even learn about democracy? You don't learn about it in school, where they don't give you any rights. You don't learn about it in your workplace, where you give up all your rights when you walk into work. Where do people learn about democracy? Don't learn about it in the Army, because Army soldiers don't have any rights. So where do people really learn about democracy? You don't. You don't learn about it in this society. The only way democracy really exists is if you practice it. You have to do it. That's how democracy works. So we're asking you to help make this democracy work, grassroots democracy work, asking you to support the Green Party candidates when they run, asking you to join the Green Party, and asking you to consider running as a Green Party candidate to help your community, help your schools, help yourself.